Um, okay, hi. My name is Liz Walzak. I'm a student at the Wagner School. I have a question about scale. When you were talking about the relationship between social entrepreneurs and government, and I know a question that arises often is the scalability of ideas and of innovative programs. And government is often seen as a way, or the connection to government is often how people think of big ideas being able to be scaled to reach broader populations, and I would love your thoughts on that. It also leads me to a second question, which is around resources and the funding of social entrepreneurial ideas and how that sort of changes the dynamic of funding in the nonprofit community, and how a lot of these ideas are scaled to reach broader populations, and some of those challenges and answers that it may have. Thank you.
How do we get to scale?
Well, Kathy's story is amazing. As far as scale, she built a social enterprise, a multi-billion-dollar social enterprise with no capital. So maybe you should take that.
I really believe, much like David and much like Paul has said, in public-private partnerships. And we created a whole industry, if you will, by without one nickel of capital or without one nickel of a charitable contribution, using a nonprofit and a for-profit. I would love to tell you that I'm just brilliant and the most creative person, but I think in our case, it was that we were creative, we had perseverance, but we also tapped into a real need. And that need drove that business model and ultimately the success of that project.
I mean, I want to come back to this just a little bit more. I don't know the answer to the scale question. I think one of the challenges for NYU and for the Kennedy School, given the fact we're both proud to host the apprentice program, is we ought to be thinking about this more than we are within the schools as a matter of research and faculty time and investment by fellows into thinking about this. You can form a relationship with government, but I will just tell you it comes fraught with a lot of problems. I've been going through this now for the last several months with Teach for America, and it is one heck of a lot harder than I thought. One heck of a lot harder. And I just had a meal with Marian Wright Edelman, who's done the Children's Defense Fund. Now she has built this up, but she's now thinking, she's thinking about going really big. She's got a wonderful model. She's done a really good work. But her question was, I've never taken government money. Should I be willing to do this or not? And she's not sure. I mean, when you look at it, it's not clear. So that's one possibility, but it's got a question mark. You can do it with, you can go to venture philanthropy, and how do we create policies that encourage venture philanthropy, which I think is really important for us to think about. You can think about having a social enterprise that maybe, instead of building the central core up and getting a great big budget, which people have a hard time doing, maybe you ought to franchise it. Maybe you ought to have, if McDonald's can franchise, if automobile companies can franchise, maybe we ought to franchise nonprofits. And in fact, you start up the program, but you find ways to people to actually do it in their communities, and you don't do it from central headquarters. The final thing is that maybe you ought to become a private company. Maybe you ought to be a for-profit company.
What's interesting is that right now, public policy, whether it's tax policy or even corporate structures, don't really foster social entrepreneurship, from my perspective. Karen Raz, who I see standing up there, is one of our fellows, and Karen's working on that precise issue. What does a new entity look like? And it's really sort of a hybrid. It's a hybrid between a for-profit and a not-for-profit. And how do you create that? What does that look like? How should the IRS look at that? How should the IRS have policies toward that? You can't treat some of the social entrepreneurship programs certainly that need to go to scale and treat it like a 501c3 like the Junior League of Topeka, Kansas. They're very, very different. And the policies today that we live with and deal with within the confines of corporate structure, the ability to raise capital, tax structure, the way the IRS looks at things, really are not, in my opinion, current or up to date with what I think your ideas are and where we want to go with social entrepreneurship.
And with a coming crunch on budgets at the federal level and the state and local level, this is going to get harder, not easier. There's going to be less money to spend on these kind of experiments, and the forces of the status quo are going to be there blocking the expenditures at the governmental level. And that's why I started out, 3 years ago, I was a big advocate for relationships with government. I am much cooler on that than I was then. I've just felt, I'm not so sure about that. Because you also get these ups and downs.
Well, the minute you touch a dollar, federal dollar,
Yeah.
you have built a mini bureaucracy to serve it. And you know that.
And you know what's coming on social spending.
Yeah, but I think one of the big issues is to let the form of the organization or the platform follow its purpose. Decide where you want to go and then adopt whatever approach you feel is most appropriate.
Yeah.
And I mean, it could be a nonprofit, it could be a low profit, limited liability corporation, it could be a blended, a hybrid, whatever.
I do think one of the other things that's occurring, the thing about scale, is there's much more now community networking going on among the social entrepreneurs than there was before. You know, that various cities are now embracing this as an idea, and they become, in effect, there are a lot of social entrepreneurs who begin to connect up with each other, and you can get the venture philanthropy fund going within that city. There's a lot of good work that's occurring. Our son, I got into this in part through our son, who is a social entrepreneur in the educational space. He teaches at social enterprise at Duke part-time, but he's got an incubator in Durham now for social change agents. And he's got like 15 or 20 different organizations under one roof, and they're sparking off each other, they're raising money together, they're doing a lot of things to sort of create a community that will be supportive of each other and really committed together.
I need the sharpest question on earth, which has a 1-minute answer.